Welcome back to another episode of STEM in Stilettos. This is your host, Zofia Morales, and I have a question for you. Have you ever found yourself avoiding someone you need to have a hard conversation with? Or maybe you've had a super awkward feedback conversation with someone and you'd love to understand how to not ever do that again. Well, if that has been your case, I would like to invite you today to join us for Courageous Conversations, Unlocking the Power of Feedback. And our guest today, Emma Collyer, is the owner and principal coach of Aspire Executive Coaching, where she helps leaders turn everyday interactions into powerful two-way conversations that spark trust, creativity, and results. Known for her down-to-earth approach and energy in the room when she transforms tough talks into growth moments that bring teams closer together. She's a certified ICF ACC coach and emotional intelligence practitioner based in Canada. Emma works with leaders around the world, helping them communicate with clarity, lead with empathy, and enjoy the ride along the way. Welcome, Emma. I'm happy to have you here with me this morning.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
All right. So, how, Emma, did you become this amazing communication coach? Because I know in the STEM world and in my family of origin, there's not a lot of emotional intelligence that just naturally occurs.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. My background is in the environmental sector. I didn't land where I am today, and I worked over my career. I trained as a landscape architect originally. I worked with a lot of engineers, project managers, and communication was often a challenge that came up time and time again. And I had the opportunity to be coached during that process and really was so amazed with the process of that and what that looked like that I started to learn and train in coaching and supporting others with those conversations. And I often found myself having those difficult conversations and maybe they weren't going so well, or hesitating and avoiding those conversations because I was concerned about the outcome. But what I learned myself through, I guess, bitter experiences, sometimes if you leave those issues, those problems, it escalates and gets a much bigger, significant problem over time.
Yeah, they get
That's,
worse. Those
yeah.
kinds of interpersonal things get worse when you don't steer into them and just deal with it.
Yes, yes, for sure. So I guess that's where I lent into that piece and supporting others with those challenges.
Very nice. So you got some coaching yourself and discovered you were kind of duck to water around this particular issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about trust. Everybody's probably like, what do you mean trust? We started with communication, but I think trust is an important part of having open communication, because if you don't have that trust, a lot of times it doesn't matter what you say or what you do, you won't be able to breathe right.
Yeah. Yes, to your point, I think we have to have that between individuals and within teams in order to feel comfortable sharing challenges and problems, working on them together and performing. Without trust, it makes it very difficult for people to ask for help and go in a different direction, perhaps. So, yeah, trust is absolutely the first step.
Yeah, and that can feel a little, what do I want to say, black magic and woo woo, but I think there are some concrete things that can be put in place that foster that. Can you share with us how to start bringing those elements into place?
Yeah, I think if you're moving into thinking about building trust with team, a lot of it is about being open and transparent about yourself. So there's a piece of self-awareness there, and there's the sharing and the sharing of your own challenges and issues with others. So they appreciate, okay, I can talk about mine here. And
Yeah.
so it's reciprocal, and then it's a two-way conversation. And there's a piece about credibility in here as well, and speaking from a place of knowledge and experience, but also really being able to support individuals and listen and lean in to what their issues are. We've become very bad at listening, I think, over time. And we're so distracted with social media and other things going on around us, what's on our computer. We forget to listen. And I think that's one of the key things we can do is really listen well, be attentive, ask questions, clarify what the other person is saying. And that goes a huge way to just building trust from the outset.
Yeah. And I think in the world that we're in, there's this time pressure that's continuously going, right? The clock, we got to get a move on, we got to hustle. What do you say to somebody who feels like they don't have time for this, like sit and eye to eyeball listen to somebody?
Yeah, I would always challenge that because I think if you can't make the time for that, people are your most important asset in any business. So that really should be your priority, is making that time, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes or longer, just checking in with people and finding out what's going on with them and maintaining and building that trust as well. So I think, yes, I hear it's a challenging environment for a lot of businesses. Time is precious, but really focusing in on that is going to help you long term. So it's that short term versus long term impact.
Yeah. I love the transparency aspect of it, especially in the latest environment where there have been all these layoffs in tech, for example, and these companies are shedding thousands of workers at a shot and claiming that AI is replacing them. I'm not certain that that's the truth. I think they're using it as spin. It's a good reason to do it. But in that kind of environment, how do you build that trust and transparency with a team? Because there can be things going on layers above you that you have no awareness are coming down the road. So, how do you manage openness with this uncertainty?
Yeah, I think you can acknowledge the uncertainty. I would say, hey, we don't know. We don't know everything that's going on, but here's what I do know. And I want to share that with you. And I think people really respect that. It's like, this is what I know. This is what I don't know. When I have more information, I will share that with you. But this is where we are right now. And then continue to communicate. Don't just do it once. You got to keep coming back to that conversation and sharing more as you go through that journey. And that becomes even more important through this kind of very fast moving world we're in right now. And that need to communicate and understand where things are. And people are only half listening sometimes to things that are being said. So you're having to say it multiple times in different ways as well.
Yeah, I love that. And that meshes with my experience when I was running the data center in my morning meeting. Actually had an agenda item that was, what are the rumors? Tell me what the grapevine is saying. And I will confirm, deny, find out more. Just what is it? Let me know. We'll get you answers. You don't have to sit there wondering.
Yeah, absolutely. I think reflect back to a time when an organization I was in was going through a lot of change. I was part of that change implementation, and the panic and anxiety was around the unknown. So the more I could do to help clarify what was concrete, what was real, what were the steps, the processes, the better people felt. They weren't entirely comfortable. They're never going to be with that kind of situation. But the more you can do to help with that, the better people are going to feel about everything in general.
Well, yeah, and we're meaning makers. And a lot of times, I think there's this misapprehension in upper management that we just won't say anything. Yeah, but people feel that there's something going on and they're going to make some shit up to live that information vacuum. Because that's just how we're wired as human beings. So I know when we're going through times like this, a lot of times you can inherit a team that's had its trust broken. They start shuffling people around and heads have rolled. And how do you start to repair trust once it's been broken? It's easier to build fresh than it is with someone who feels betrayed.
Yeah, I want to say if it's the same, you're leading the team and the trust is broken between you and the team, that's quite difficult to rebuild and it's going to take a lot of time. And I think patience is going to be key to that. A lot of communication, openness, and transparency again is going to help, almost over communicating in some ways to rebuild that. Conversely, I think if you're coming into a new team, maybe as a manager, and the trust isn't there from the outset, perhaps they had no trust for your predecessor, you're starting from the outset. I think I'm just reflecting on a situation that I came into a team and I was at told outrightly, we don't need you here. That was the first message I heard. I'm like,
Ouch.
okay, there's some issues. And when I started digging, it was because they hadn't felt valued by their previous manager. So I spent a lot of time, probably in the first 6 months, getting to know them as individuals, getting to know them as a team, what made them tick, what contributions they brought forward, and building them as a team again, because they were just working in isolation as individuals. And that was really rewarding to see, because they were an amazing group of people and they're just being left a little bit on the sidelines.
Yeah.
And so just bringing them up to the forefront again, getting to know them and putting them on a bit of a pedestal again and making them feel valued was key to that, I would say.
What are some concrete things you can do to make somebody feel valued, feel appreciated, feel seen?
So I'm going to say it sounds really obvious, but I always go back to listening to people. So making the time. So what's going on for you right now? Tell me what's going on in your world. What are the challenges? What are the issues? What can I support you with? And really digging into that, asking questions, clarifying what you're hearing. And then if you are able to provide that support for that individual, or go away and find out how to provide that support if you're not the person who's able to do that. So I think that's where I would be starting and just really digging into that piece for sure.
I like that. I like that. You had mentioned earlier to share some of your vulnerabilities, some of your shortcomings as part of this process. And that kind of brings up the question for me, where is the line to like TMI, right? Because
Yeah.
say you're on a first date with someone, that's not the moment to bring up all of your exes and the way all of your previous relationships have exploded. So help us with a little of the emotional intelligence around where do we put that line?
Yeah, I guess coming from a place where you're maybe trying to encourage your team members to share some of their challenges, and you're maybe noticing they're hesitant to do that because they're not sure how it's going to land. They maybe don't want to look bad. They don't want to look foolish in front of their colleagues.
They don't want to
So
end up in a performance improvement plan. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think in those situations, sharing maybe a challenge that you're facing right now, it's like, hey, just wanted to share with you all, this happened to me recently, and this is how I dealt with it. Have any of you experienced that? Or how can I help you deal with these challenges? I'm here to support you. And I think just gradually creating that space over time. It's not going to happen overnight if you're coming in fairly new with these kind of questions and ideas. But I think the more you do that and sharing small, I would call them snippets of this has happened to me, or these are the things I faced over my career, the more people are likely to come forward and go, yeah, that's happened to me as well. Or, yeah, I get that. Last week this happened. So I think it's just trying to build that space where people feel comfortable talking about when things didn't go so well, so you can work on them and move forward.
How do you decide when and where to have one or more of these conversations? Because I know from my own journey, there are some things that are better shared one-on-one, and there are other things that work fine in a group.
Yeah, I think some of that I would say is a bit of intuition and going with your gut a little bit. If you're in a team, you don't want to be singling people out for things that maybe have gone badly. You want to be praising in that group setting and maybe highlighting some more collective challenges that you're seeing across the organization. If there's more delicate situations, I would always do that one-on-one and talk with that individual, particularly if you're concerned that that person is maybe holding back a little bit because they're worried about what the impact is going to be.
Yeah.
So I think,
Yeah. I had this rule of thumb. If it's good, do it in the group.
yes, absolutely.
If it's bad, behind closed doors.
Yes. Yeah. I think where and when is really important with those conversations. I always talk about don't choose an open plan office to have a one-on-one conversation with somebody if it's a little bit more sensitive or the person could be feeling uncomfortable with the message or is maybe a bit embarrassed by that.
Yeah, exactly. So we are up on our first break already. And I love this. This has been really useful information, I think, especially if you haven't spent a lot of time in management or you've had bad management examples of how to communicate with people, I think this can be really instructive to just go back to the basics, back to the fundamental stuff. I like to give a little bit of homework over the break. What do you think would be a nice thought exercise for us over the next couple of?
I guess I would encourage everyone to reflect on a recent conversation that maybe didn't go as well as you'd hoped. What could you do differently going forwards? How could you reframe that? What could you do to get that in a better place?
Yeah, I like that. I like that. So think about that conversation, have a little reflection, and hang with us. We'll be right back from the break where we'll pick up how to create a psychologically safe environment. So stay tuned.
Oh, shout it loud, but we'll hear. Tech is ours and we show no fear. No fear. No fear. No fear.
Thanks for hanging in with us through the break. This is Zofia Morales. I am back with the amazing and wonderful Emma Collyer. And so we had a little thought exercise over the break about a conversation perhaps that didn't go the way we wanted it to. What are some common mistakes that people make when they're having these conversations, when they're giving feedback? Let's provide some tools we can use to maybe try something different. I won't say fix it. That's always an ongoing process, but different tools we can use to try to get a different result in the future.
Yeah, lots of areas where we can improve. And I guess some common mistakes that I hear a lot, we provide too much negative feedback to individuals. So we're always focusing on what could be better, what could be improved, and we're not providing feedback on what's working well. And there's some research that's been done over the years, and the balance really ideally should be, if you're wanting a high performing team, 5 pieces of positive feedback to 1 piece of more constructive, more negative feedback.
Wow. So not even like a feedback sandwich, which is what I was told back in the day. It's like say something good, then the correction, and then say something good. No, you need 2 pieces of bread on each side.
Well, I'm going to say, this is overall, so not
Right.
necessarily in the same sentence, but yes, overall, that's the general kind of ratio you should be looking for. I'd say the sandwich approach doesn't work so well these days, and people see right through that.
They see what's coming. It's like, where's the big meaty butt in this thing?
Yeah. And so I would say when I'm talking about this now with teams and groups, just focus on what the key message is. You don't have to sugarcoat it. And actually, when you do sugarcoat it, the message gets lost. So people come away from that conversation not really understanding what you were saying.
Yeah, I've always found that the more clear and specific I can be, the more useful it turns out to be instead of going, you need to just improve how you're dealing with fill in the blank process.
Yes.
That it's really mushy and it doesn't really give them anything particular that they can work towards improving or concrete things they can do, or even a measure to know if they're making progress. And so if I can provide some of that more concrete stuff, try this approach, consider doing this. The metric that needs to be met is this. It makes a difference.
Absolutely does. I think you highlighted a key point as well that often gets missed. It's the kind of the action planning or how we're going to measure this. We might say, hey, this area needs to be improved. These are the things I'd recommend, but we're not doing any check-in. So has that actually been implemented, tried out? Are we going to meet again in a week's time to review how this has gone?
Yeah. And what does success look like?
Yes.
Yeah. My husband had a feedback meeting from higher up. And I think it was deliberately badly done because they just wanted to push him out. But that's my personal opinion. But it went, you need to improve what you're doing. You need to make your boss look good. Well, that's nothing feedback. How have I made him look bad? What do you want to see improved? What are, progress? No, there was nothing actionable in that meeting.
No, I know this often comes up in conversations I have with teams. Like, I get this feedback, I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always encouraging, okay, so ask some more questions, find out more detail. If they're not able to provide that, then I would question sometimes the credibility of the feedback that's been provided. If it's so vague and so high level and there's no detail with it, is it really valid and useful feedback?
Yeah. And in his case, it was not because he did ask a lot of follow-up questions and it didn't get any better.
There's nothing. No.
Yeah. So there was really nothing to be done. So just from an employee perspective, if you find yourself in a situation similar to what my husband's was, where it's just this black morass of negativity and you just need to be different or better in some undefinable way, what are your words of advice for someone in that space?
Yeah, I think this is a tricky one. And I would always say get a second opinion. If you're getting this kind of feedback and you're not sure what to do with it, you've asked the questions, you're still not getting anything else, I would go to somebody else that you trust, whether that's a peer or mentors, a different supervisor, and just say, hey, I've received this feedback. I'm not sure what to do with it. I'd love your perspective on this. And just see where that goes. Because I think I personally received feedback in the past. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't understand what the person was getting at. I shared it with one of my mentors at the time, and the view was like, yeah, don't do anything with this. Just ignore it and carry on doing what you're doing. There was a different intention behind it. And I think sometimes we have to take what we're hearing and then decide what we want to do with it. And sometimes the decision is to do nothing with it.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me back to like the political landscape, right? You've gotten this feedback, let's say from a manager or supervisor or something like this, and you're not getting the concrete action points that you need or any kind of a measurable target you can aim for. Who can you take that to without getting politically sideways? Give us some thoughts around this.
It's a difficult. What do you go above them even to get more feedback? I think if you have people that have seen how you operate and seen how you work, I would be going and having conversations with them, trying to understand, where is this feedback coming from? Where do I fit into this? And how do I move forward and action it? So I think, again, just getting some different perspectives and views on what you're hearing. But I would still go back to that person that's delivering and say, okay, so, I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm not getting that much detail. What would you like to be different in 6 months' time or 3 months' time? What are the key actions you're seeing me take forward? And try and put them on the spot a little bit.
Yeah.
But I would keep pushing.
I like that. I like that. A polite pushback.
Polite pushback.
Indeed. Indeed. So let's talk about making feedback truly effective in the workplace. I know we've kind of brushed up against some of that, but give us a little checklist that we can maybe use when we're preparing to have one of these conversations.
I think I would start with, what's the key message? What's the one key message you want to get across to that individual? Because sometimes we provide too many things and then the point gets lost. So stick with the one. If you have to, maybe two, but don't go beyond that because it's going to get diluted. And then I would think about, when are you going to do this? So timing is really important. So if you notice something happening yesterday, 2 days before, I would get on it as soon as possible. Don't leave it a week, 2 weeks, a month, because the person is going to forget what happened and you've lost that opportunity to make changes improve.
Exactly.
So timing is important. When you provide feedback, I would touch that a little bit. Try and do that. If it's constructive feedback, do that one-on-one in a private space. Maybe go for a walk with that person, go for a coffee, whatever it is, but do that in a private setting.
And what about if you're trying to, I call it manage up?
Yes.
How do we approach that conversation a little differently than we would with like a peer or a subordinate?
Yeah, there's obviously the dynamic there. So I think, again, And often I talk about, so you can maybe acknowledge what's working well between the two of you or what that person has done. Hey, I really liked how you led that meeting, or I really like the project that we were working on together. I really value your input. There's just a few things I'm noticing that maybe could be improved, and they are X, Y, and Z. So I think acknowledging their value and what they bring to the table is key in that dynamic. But again, you want to be direct. I think don't try and sugarcoat it, because they're like, well, where is this going? So
Yeah.
I think just be really clear with your points.
Don't pussyfoot.
No,
Be diplomatic, but don't pussyfoot.
absolutely.
So let's talk about the psychologically safe environment. That's become a term that you hear quite a bit now. Tell us what a psychologically safe environment is first.
I think my view, it's a space that people feel comfortable sharing their challenges, their issues. I would say, go to your point, TMI, not sharing everything, but in terms of the workplace challenges, we feel comfortable saying, hey, I'm really struggling with this. I could do with some support, or challenging others on maybe their approach to the process. And it's done in a way that is supportive rather than it feeling aggressive and negative. So you're trying to create this really healthy space where conflict is good, questions are good, but also is supportive and enhances performance. So that's how I view it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that hinders it a lot is this concern that if I own anything that's less than perfect, that it might mean that I'll be dismissed. And there are organizations that operate that way. If you've screwed up, you're gone. And I don't espouse that support, I guess, is the best way to put or that approach, because you don't allow for any kind of improvement. You don't allow for any kind of experimentation or making things better than they are, because what if it fails and I'm out of here? And one of the things I really appreciated about some of my earliest workplaces was they flat out came and told me, they said, look, here's the deal. If you screw up, that's okay. Just don't lie about it or hide it. If you screw up, own it, let us know. We'll figure out where things went wrong, and we'll work to make everything better so everyone's successful here. And really, the only way you could get canned for cause was to lie about it or hide it. And I think that is a really key aspect of creating a psychologically safe environment, because it's really hard to lift up your head and say anything if you're worried it's going to get lopped off.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I really love that that was your experience as well, because I reflect on a time in an organization, some very different leaders. One, very much the approach you described there. It's like, hey, let us know if there's a problem or something didn't work. Another leader, it was very much frowned upon. Everything had to be perfect. So as a consequence, people did hide things and things got missed. And it was a very uncomfortable environment to be in. And problems escalated in the background and then suddenly blew up because they weren't shared and they weren't talked about openly, and it wasn't seen as a good thing.
Right. And you can't do any kind of early damage control. If you know that you messed up and you said the wrong thing to a customer, it's far better to clean it up now than to have the customer discover X period of time down the road that they've been laboring under a misapprehension.
Yes, it triggered a thought as well. I've seen, unfortunately, leaders also say, oh, this is a psychologically safe space. We all share our problems. But then there's consequences when people do that. And suddenly it's like, oh, okay, it really isn't. So I'm being told one thing, but the actions are not following up. So that's a really difficult situation to be in.
Yeah, exactly. When they say one thing and then they execute in a different manner, it really creates a psychologically unsafe space. It crucifies your trust when you operate that way. Yeah, one of the things when I was in the data center that we would do after any kind of a breakdown, wipeout, whatever it was, we would have a debrief afterwards. And when we had new employees, they'd be a little bit leery about the debrief because who knows if heads are going to roll here, right? It's like, yeah, no, no, no. The only reason we need to know who's involved is so we can get the full story. That's the only reason we need to know. This is not an assignment of blame. This is, let's really look at the process and see where it fell apart and how we can make it more robust. And I found after you've been through a few cycles of this and you see that heads do not roll and processes do change and the workflow becomes better, people start to participate in that with great gusto.
Yeah, it's a great example. I think over the years, I've been involved in lots of projects, either as a project manager or part of a project team. And those debriefs, as you described, are so critical to gaining information to improve going forwards. And the way they're done is key to that. Done in a really, okay, let's really look at this in detail. We want to learn rather than we want to point fingers and blame. So I think it's a very different approach, which, yeah, is hugely beneficial.
Makes all the difference. Well, we are up on our second break already. What do you suggest for homework? What's our thought homework over this break?
Oh my goodness. I guess what might be holding you back in creating that psychologically safe space for yourself and your teams? What might be holding you back from doing that? And I guess that's a reflection point.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's an amazing reflection point. So spend some time on the challenges, the barriers to creating this space, and hang with us. We'll be right back.
Oh, shout it loud, but we'll hear. Tech is ours and we show no fear. No fear. No fear. No fear.
Thanks for hanging in with us through the break. This is Zofia Morales, and I am back with the amazing and wonderful Emma Collyer. And we spent a little time over the break considering what are the challenges, the hangups, or the holdbacks that might keep you from putting together the sort of a safe space in your company, whether it's your company or your little section of your company. I know when I was a manager, I found I could build a certain bubble around my team. So help us out a little bit here, Emma. What are some of the things that we can do to overcome some challenges? Maybe upper management has a different philosophy. Maybe this is a low trust environment. What are some of the things we can do to start shifting that in our own little sphere?
Yeah, I think you can be the person that initiates those first conversations. And I think often asking for feedback yourself on how you are doing in relation to an individual or a team starts that conversation. And for a lot of people, they're like, oh, I've never been asked that by my manager. I've never been asked what I think of them or what they could do differently. And it starts a whole kind of different train of thought, different conversation, different kind of quality within that team. And that filters out. And the more you do it, people get really interested in that and really intrigued. It's like, oh, so what are you doing in that team? And people want to learn more about and start applying approaches themselves. I will say as well, very much, leaders are leading, so they have to demonstrate those skills themselves. And it does start a lot of the time at the top of the organization if you're wanting to embed those behaviors and that way of doing things. So I think the more leaders, senior leaders in the organization can start that questioning process, it's going to help. But if you are within your bubble, that's what you can do that is actionable right now.
And let's say you're starting a debrief process. How do you protect the people participating in that? In other words, if your management has more of a heads will roll sort of philosophy, how do you protect your team and still have that openness?
Well, I think you can still have an open conversation with the team. It's then, I guess, your choice what you feed back to leadership and management as a collective. These are the things that we've noticed. These are the things that we've identified could be improved next time. So you're not saying there's a failure or anything negative, but it's like these are the points where we can adjust and make changes to, and it's going to improve performance on the next project. So it's just using language in a particular way, so it's not seen as a negative.
Yeah, yeah. And I would say my rule of thumb is if somebody done good, say their name all day long, talk about it, toot the horn. Emma did amazing. But if something broke, failed, or went sideways, talk about the process in the system.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. I think you don't want to be singling people out. And that's when it feels very blamey and finger pointing and negative. And that's when trust is lost. So, yeah, to your point, processes and systems, identify those. Sure.
Love that. I love that. So, could you share a story about someone who transformed their approach to giving feedback? What did they change? And how did things change because of that?
Yeah. So, I have just a few clients that fit into that category. I think recent clients were discussing they'd not really asked for feedback before from their team or their colleagues. And so it's kind of set about, okay, well, this is the first challenge then. Go and ask for feedback. Before you provide feedback, let's ask what they think. And so you're getting some information, some data, some insights. And through that process, they built another level of trust with those individuals. They found out some really interesting facts about themselves that they weren't aware of. It helped with their own development and performance, which increased because they knew then what they needed to work on. But it also sent a message to the wider organization. This leader is having these conversations. This is really important. It was noticed by their execs in a positive way. And it was also noticed by the team members. This is a leader doing something really great. I want to do that too. So I think role modeling. And I guess overall, my takeaway from what they got from that was I would say their executive presence elevated, their position in the company was more elevated and visible in a positive way. And they learned that feedback was beneficial to receive before you even provide it to others. So I think it just changed the narrative.
Well, and I think that colors your approach to it as well, because your own experience of feedback is going to show up in the feedback conversations that you've had or that you have. And if it was an unfortunate experience for you, you're likely to perpetuate that until you've shifted that and made it a little different.
Yes.
So, sorry.
Now that comes up a lot with clients and when I talk with teams. I've had bad experience. I was delivered feedback in this way. It sat with me for months. For some people, it sat with me for a year, or it's even still there now. I can't move on from it. So their view then of even somebody saying the word, can I provide you with feedback? It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
anxiety.
You've pushed a big red button.
So even removing that word and just saying, hey, can I have a conversation with you? It's different to saying, can I provide you with some feedback? I think we forget that as well.
Yeah, exactly. These can be sort of triggering words because, yeah, sometimes feedback is misused.
Yes, sure.
So let's talk about the world that we're working in nowadays, because it used to be that you could meet with someone on the smoking balcony or brush up against them in the break room or this sort of thing and have a private, low-key kind of conversation with someone. But now we're in a world of remote work and hybrid work, and those kind of opportunities don't just naturally arrive. So how has this changed the role, the need for feedback, and how you deliver it?
Yeah, I guess my view actually since COVID, communication has been more challenging for people. And the organizations that I talk with even now say it's still difficult for people and it's become more difficult because of remote working. And I think when we're thinking about feedback, you want to be doing that one-on-one in person, ideally. But sometimes it's not possible. So you're then limited to Zoom or Teams or whatever platform you're on. And you're having to carve out and make space for that time as well to have those conversations. It's not a natural thing that you're going to come across somebody, or, hey, can we just have 10 minutes in this meeting room? You're having to book the time and schedule it in. And so it's very different. And then there's all those kind of trigger points. Oh, why does my manager want a conversation with me
Yes.
in 10 minutes time? There's all that kind of narrative that goes with it as well. So I think there are a lot more hurdles that remote working presents in terms of having those quality conversations.
Yeah. And speaking of, we'll go back to the vacuum of information. My manager wants a 15-minute meeting with me. Yeah. How do we control the narrative that goes on in their head around that? And do we want to make sure that the interval is small between the ask and the actual meeting?
Yeah. I always talk about, when we're in that kind of feedback space and we've been told we want a meeting, try and control that story that you're telling yourself. The story you're telling yourself might be, oh, I'm going to get fired, or I'm going to get laid off, whatever. And it might be actually they just want to have a conversation with you about a piece of project work, but you're also noticing your own anxiety and emotions in that. So it's trying to separate your emotions and how you're feeling from the story you might be telling yourself, and actually what is factually being shared with you, which actually could be really small. So it's trying to control that spiraling before it takes over.
Yeah, exactly. Put a pin in the awfulizing. It's probably not anything that you're imagining it's going to be.
Yes.
And even if it is, you're not going to change anything by getting yourself worked up before you go in to deal with it.
No, it's just you're going to likely block out then receiving the information, whether it's good or bad, because you've almost created a barrier before you come into that conversation, because you've put it in this place where this is going to be a negative experience. So I think it's just being mindful of, let's just be open. Let me listen really clearly in terms of what's being said.
Yeah. If you're requesting one of these meetings, what can you do to stop the spiral before it happens?
If you've been asked to attend a meeting?
No, if you're trying to bring a subordinate in to have this conversation.
If you can share maybe a little bit about what you want to talk about, it's like, hey, I'd like to talk about this project with you. Can we just spend 15 minutes on that? I think that will help, because if we provide no subject or no context, then the stories start going.
Yeah, the information vacuum gets filled.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and I find that if you can keep the topic as, what do I want to say, neutral and concrete as you can, that, again, helpful thing, as opposed to, well, we're going to talk about your performance. Oh, that's very subjective and not neutral.
Yeah, I absolutely keep it factual. So what have you noticed? And I sometimes say, if you can acknowledge effort or their position, is in terms of, so an example would be, hey, I really appreciate all the work you're putting in on this project. I know you spent a lot of time on this week. There's just a couple of things that I'd like to suggest we could improve and change.
Right. Or I've noticed XYZ. Can you share with me what's going on that we've got XYZ instead of UVW, whatever your experience is? Because I try to remind myself when I go into one of these conversations that people are always giving you the best that they know how to give you. And if they're not hitting the mark, there's a reason they're not hitting the mark. It hasn't been clearly explained to them. There's some sort of limitation or restriction going on that keeps them from being able to give you XYZ. And so I like to open the floor to, okay, I've noticed this result. Tell me how we're arriving at this result.
Yeah, I love that, because it's an open conversation then. You're not making any assumptions. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I hear is assumptions are made before the conversation even starts. But the way you've described, it's open. Tell them what's going on here.
Yeah, exactly. And that allows us to figure out how it can be best be addressed and fixed, as opposed to, you are just wrong and a bad employee.
Yes, we don't want to hear that.
No, that is terrible. And speaking of wanting to hear things, we're arriving at the tail end of our conversation here, and I would love to share with the listeners how they can engage with you and your work. Did you bring a gift for them today? What do we have happening here?
Yeah, so I did bring a gift. So if you go to needmoretrust.com, it will take you to a bit of a freebie, which gives you some guidance on how to have those maybe more difficult conversations and how to frame things. And it also takes you to my website as well. So you can find out how to reach out through that. That's the best
Beautiful.
way.
And we'll have that in the show notes so you can find that if it whizzed by you, not to worry. So, in the last couple minutes we have here, what would be your words of wisdom for someone who's been struggling with having these kind of confrontational, I'll put it in air quotes, confrontational sort of conversations because they can feel confronting?
They can. And I think one of the things that I picked up through these conversations, there are some frameworks that can help. So if you're worried about, I don't know how to put my words together, I don't know what to say. So one of the frameworks is called SBI. So what is the situation, the behavior, and the impact? So you're really clearly setting out to that individual, raising awareness of what you're seeing, and then potentially putting an action at the end. What I want to see, I'd like to see in the future is X, Y, and Z. Another one is a Stanford model, which is I like, I wish, what if? And that's a really collaborative kind of framework to use in that feedback conversation. And it's actually a good one to use in an upward management way as well. So, hey, I really like what you're doing on this. What if? So you're just really using those frameworks, setting out what you want to say, and then practice. I would always encourage people to practice before they go into those conversations 10, 15 times before you actually say it, because then it will take away some of your own anxiety in delivering that message so you can get the message across clearly.
Yeah, and you can be more present for the
Yes.
answers and the responses. When you're thinking so much about, well, how do I do this? What is my side of the message? Blah, blah. You've got all that head trash happening. You're not present for the other person and to receive what they're actually telling you. Because as you mentioned, a lot of times we go in with preconceived ideas, and that's pretty normal and something you can train yourself out of, but it's pretty typical to have a preconceived idea going into it. And if you're up in your head, you won't be able to receive the feedback that allows for a constructive pivot. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Emma. It's been a really good conversation.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Yes. And thank you, dear listener, for taking the time to tune in with us today. I know you have 1,000 other ways you could be using this time, and I'm glad you decided to invest in your own personal growth and development here with us today. I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment below this video in the comments or shoot me an email to Zofia@stemandstilettos.com. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, what you agreed with, what you didn't agree with. Are there topics you want to see, other people you would like to see me talking to? And until next week, go out, be bold, be beautiful, and be authentically you.